are live, Shelby. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I appreciate it.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
So, to kick things off, why don't you tell listeners a little bit about yourself?
On the personal side, I was born and raised in Austin. I still live in Austin, so it's a different Austin than the one I grew up in. Apparently, a lot of people want to move here, and that brings some growing pains, but I'm definitely not one of the complainers. The growth has been really great for Austin.
Yeah.
So
Is
I
Austin
live in
still weird
Austin.
or
There are parts of Austin that are still weird, but it's a lot less weird than it used to
yeah,
be, which is a little bit of a bummer. But
kind of a
I
bummer?
think on the whole, the growth has been really great for the city. Plenty of challenges remain, but and one of those is to try to remain at least partially weird. Um, but yeah, I live here. I have three daughters, about 3, 5, 7,
Wow.
in terms of ages. I run a company called GrowthMatch. We went through the Techstars Accelerator a couple years ago, and I mentor now for Techstars Austin and a couple other Techstars, or one other Techstars program, the physical health program up in Fort Worth. So am just generally involved in helping other founders avoid some of the many, many mistakes that I've made over the years, starting a couple companies, building a few different products. So
Yeah, I love your story and your path of serial entrepreneurship. So I would love for you to share that story with listeners. And then I would love to talk a little bit more about some of those pitfalls and challenges that you face.
yeah, let's see. So I studied physics engineering in college. I worked at a company called Futron for just shy of a year right after college doing engineering work. We mostly did contract engineering for NASA,
Hmm.
big space nerd. Um, and pretty quickly realized that I didn't want to work in a larger organization. So it was kind of either maybe go to business school or start a business. I chose the latter. Built a service business over a period of 5 or 6 years with a good friend. Um, had a really good time, had a lot of fun, and ultimately realized kind of the service business, running an agency type thing wasn't really for me. Um, and together with that same co-founder, we launched our first product, kind of product business, and grew that, became really fascinated with the whole process of building product. Um, five-ish years ago, set out on my own to start my first product business on my own, built a B2B SaaS product. Um, Basically failed to get it into market in any sort of meaningful way. I mean, we got to revenue, and um, I think if I knew then what I knew now about studying customers and how to do go to market, we probably could have made it work. But ultimately decided to pivot that into a different product called Jolly. That's the product that we went through Techstars with. Jolly was a cool product. It was uh, a market network, so kind of half link, half social and labor talent. So think
Hmm.
like half Upwork, half LinkedIn. Our target market, like the beachhead market, was the events industry. So it was
Right.
cool. We had a whole bunch of on our supply side, we had a whole bunch of everything from kind of bartenders, servers to audio, video people, basically everybody required to put on a big event. And
Yeah.
then we had a whole
What
bunch
year
of
was this
event
again?
companies. This was 2019.
Okay.
So we grew that. I think we had maybe 30, 40,000 people on the supply side, and we were growing maybe, I think when we started Techstars, maybe 2 or 3 thousand people a week, maybe twice that towards the end of Techstars, and then had a bunch of businesses on the demand side that would use it to recruit and hire people and all that. It was very cool. It was not a marketplace model, so we didn't take a percentage. It was a subscription model for the businesses, and basically got that all teed up. We had a seed round. We had everything done, lead investor, signed term sheet, all the due diligence done. Um, and our demo day was March 4th of 2020. And on March 6th, South by Southwest was canceled. Every event on planet Earth was canceled that
Yeah.
weekend. And on Monday, the lead investor called and said, "Hey, we're not going to do the round." So that was, the beginning of COVID was gruesome for everybody, and And that was an emotional roller coaster for us.
Of course.
Ended up pivoting that into a small SaaS product that's still called Jolly, still exists today.
Wow.
Um, and got that kind of stabilized. And then about a year ago, um, connected a bunch of different dots that were interesting to us and started GrowthMatch. And we're about a year in, maybe 14 months in with GrowthMatch. So that's my journey.
What a journey. I think that's a lot more that than you would have gotten out of business school, instead of just going to get an MBA. Wait, good for you.
You know, I think yeah, I think we kind of hard knocks style learned a bunch of lessons. I think we also probably could have I probably could have I think there are probably some shortcuts that business school might have enabled me to take, but all in all, it's been a heck of a journey so far and still having fun with it. So
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So you've worked with so many different companies, built so many different companies. What was your biggest learning, would you say, from your past experiences and all of your different ventures?
I think well, there are a number. I think probably the most important one is learning how to study customers. I think there's a lot of kind of overgeneralized advice here and not a lot of specific advice about, you hear things like get out of the building, go talk to your customers, all this kind of stuff. But it's really hard to do and it's hard to do well.
Yeah,
And if you don't do it, then your journey looks kind of a lot like mine probably. You'll build products that,
people don't want.
either don't solve a big enough problem. Yeah, they'll either, don't solve a big enough problem for the customer, or you're not messaging it right, so go to market's really hard, or you price it wrong, or, all the things. And so this is something that took my co-founder Zach and I a while to figure out. This was kind of a root cause of some of the struggles that we had, and then also obviously it took a while to get good at it. Partially because like we couldn't really find anyone to help us do it, like to do it well.
Mm,
And so we kind of had to teach ourselves. And I would say at this point we're pretty good at it. It's one of the main things that I help, other founders with if I'm mentoring for Techstars or something. This is very common. Like it's I'd say probably 85-90% of the founders that I talk to, when I say, look, like I can't tell you if your business is a good idea or if your product is the right product, but I can help you learn how to go talk to your customers and figure all that stuff out. And
mm,
most of the time they're like, yes, I need to learn how to do that. So that was one of the biggest learnings, is like
mm.
how to really study a customer, how to understand what their problems really are, what their desired outcomes are, what their preferred solution is, what their willingness to pay for a solution is, all that kind of stuff.
In 3 tips, how can people, get better at studying their customers and understanding their customers?
First is you have to go in a specific order. So
Okay.
if you start out by asking people what they think about your solution, then you're already kind of off on the wrong foot,
Mm,
for a bunch of different reasons, which I can go into. Um, But first, I will say, like, I think there's an order that you should go in, and
mm,
you should start with understanding the customer and the customer's problems first, and then test what solutions they desire. So this is very difficult for founders to do. It's very difficult for me to do still,
yeah.
because when you have an idea, like usually that idea manifests as a product idea. And so it's very difficult to like put that on the shelf for a little while and say, look, like, I guess I'll say it this way. When you have an idea for a product, what's actually important isn't your product idea, it's the way that you think you might help people, right? So if you've got an idea for a widget, what's important isn't the design of the widget. What's important is what's behind that. As a founder or potential founder, is this desire of this idea that like, here's this like person that's got this problem that this widget might solve, right? And so it's important to like set your design idea of the widget on the shelf for a little while and just focus on that person
Mm,
and really go understand them and really understand what their problems are and validate for yourself is this like it is the problem that I thought they had an actual problem for them? Is it a big painful problem? My co-founder and I call this a BPP. Like, is it a big painful problem? Is it really like their
Oh, I like
top
that.
problem, or maybe their second top problem? But if it's not, like, you're really just setting yourself up for a whole bunch of pain and misery, right? Like and so that's what's tough, is like setting the product idea aside, or the design idea for the product aside, and just really proving to yourself that, like, this is a customer that I want to help. This is a problem that they really want help solving. And I think once you do that, and again, like, this is the type of generalized advice that isn't actually helpful for founders in many cases, because they don't know how to do this, right? Like,
Mm,
okay, somebody listening to this podcast might say, like, okay, I could buy in, like, to what Shelby's saying. Like, it makes sense that I want to understand the customer and the problem, but, like, how really do you do that? And that's what Zach and I have had to get really clear on. And like, and we just had to make up, like, a process that we use now, and that, I by no means think it's like the best process in the world, but like at least it's one. We found this thing called a need narrative, that somebody wrote a Medium post about this thing called a need narrative. And it's like a Mad Lib that you fill out, and it makes this like one-page document that's like a description of a customer and their problems and their, existing solutions and inadequacies of all the things. And we've like improved it. I think the version we use now is different from that one, but that's like kind of what that was a key moment for us when we said, look, like, here's what this looks like. Like, when you go study your customer and you go in order, and then once you kind of proven that the customer is blank, like is a definable person with big painful problem, all the things, and then you go test your solution. Well, what you're actually doing in both of those stages is the same. And it's this cycle. You create an asset of some type, and then you go get feedback from the customer in the form of interviews, and you iterate on the asset. And you just do this until the asset is, like, quote unquote working. And when you're studying a customer, what it means for a need, the need narrative is the asset.
mm,
And you iterate through these conversations, and what you're iterating toward is, you know, close to 100% success rate of talking to a customer, reading them your need narrative, and having them being like, wow, it sounds like you know me better than I know myself. And when
mm,
that's happening 100% of the time, you know that you have a statement that reflects reality. It's like reflects a real person, and this is what they're saying their problems are and their desired outcomes, and this is what they're saying they use to solve those problems, and all that. And you can pressure check and say, okay, is this a problem that we want to solve as founders, or as a founder? Like, um uh are we seeing, when they say these are the existing alternatives, like, are they spending money right now to try to solve these problems? If they are, then there's probably like then there could be a good business opportunity there. If they're not spending money, then, you haven't proven that the customer has willingness to pay to solve the problem, right? So it's
right.
going to be very difficult later to get them to pay for a solution, right? And so this was like going back to that very first product that I built when I set out on my own, this B2B SaaS product. I think if we had done this, we would have realized early that the existing solution in this need narrative, like long before we started designing a solution, long before we built anything, coded anything, tried to sell anything, in that customer discovery stage, before solution testing, in that customer discovery stage,
Mm,
we would have realized that the existing alternatives were free, right? So that we built this SaaS product, but like the customer that we were going after, their existing solutions were spreadsheets, emails, text
mm-hmm,
messages. It was kind of a payment freelancer management system. So it was like organize, manage, and pay your people. And so they were using like spreadsheets and emails and text messages, and then like checks and just like janky Venmo, just like these things. And this is like a very dangerous thing, right? If you're trying to make a B2B product, and the solutions that the business is already using are like kind of inadequate, but like
yeah.
also free and already like in use,
Mm-hmm,
this is going to be like a hard thing to sell against, right? And
yeah.
so anyway, that's like, so you asked for three things. One, go in order. Cannot overemphasize the importance of really understanding the customer in like a systematic way, And um, that means, having an asset that you're iterating on as you do these conversations. It means conducting those conversations in an organized manner, um, not asking kind of leading questions and all those things. But I really think that's kind of the most important thing. I don't know. I'll think about what the other two or three would be.
Yeah, but I feel like that one captured so many different things. So I think great piece of advice. And I'm curious to hear how you applied that learning to Growth Match and where you are today. What are customers looking for? Also, tell listeners what Growth Match does.
Sure, yeah. So we kind of started, so all of the products that we've built have been in the similar space, in kind of future of work, not really gig economy, but like talent marketplaces,
Yeah.
talent, stuff like that.
Freelance work. I
And
feel like that space, of course, as the workforce evolves, is going to explode and is exploding.
yeah, totally. And a
Hmm.
lot of interesting things have been happening in the space and continue to. So about 14 months ago or so, we um with regard to our previous product, basically we found that the problem that it was solving wasn't big enough to justify being able to charge very much for the product. Like
Mm.
essentially the customer's willingness to pay for the solution was low. Um, and the amount of revenue you can generate per customer constrains what growth channels you can use, right? If you can't generate enough revenue, then you can't really do outbound sales or whatever. And it was very low. And so our growth channels were constrained for that product. And it was going to be it needed to be like organic, maybe SEO could work, but probably not, or at least not anytime soon. And so we just kind of like got that product stable and we said, do we really want to spend a whole bunch of time trying to figure out how to maybe build more features, increase willingness to pay so we have more growth channels available to us, or do something new? And so we chose the latter. And Growth Match came out of, so Growth Match today is a little different than how we launched it about a year ago,
Hmm.
partially because we consistently do this
You were
cycle that I'm talking
iterating.
about, right? So sidebar, I think there's a pretty damaging misconception about customer discovery, that it's like kind of something you do upfront. So it's
And
like
it
this thing you
stops
do in the
there, but it
beginning and
should
then
be
you like,
ongoing.
oh, totally. Like I
Hmm.
think it should be, maybe this is number two of your three, right? It's like everybody who's going to build a product just by default assumes they're always going to be working on their product, right?
Hmm.
Your engineering design, your product team is going to be building and improving whatever it is that you build forever, for the whole life of the business. Well, discovery is the same way, or it should be the same way, right? So this in practice, what does this look like? Well, it looks like maybe a weekly cadence of one, formal recorded customer discovery interview per week or something like that. Um, so um we do this, and when we decided to start something new, we do, it's very common to do more of it, and like really for that to be the focus at the beginning. So that's why this
Hmm.
misconception exists, is because it's kind of like all you should be doing at the beginning, and later you're doing other things like fundraising and building product and sales and all the stuff, but at the beginning it's kind of all you are doing or should be
Mm.
doing. So we did a whole bunch of what I would call semi-structured customer problem interviews, right? Where we're not saying anything about here's this idea we have or this solution or whatever. Just, define a customer, get them on video calls, ask permission, record the calls, and do kind of semi-structured, because you're kind of following a script, but then there's um, freedom within that for the person who's conducting the interview to kind of like stop, go off script, double click, drill into something if they want to.
Mm.
Um, so we did a bunch of these, mostly with startup founders who were kind of at different stages, but mostly on the earlier stage or earlier side of things. And we're just interested in this space we're interested in this problem of when you're a startup, you always have gaps on your team and you don't have resources to fill these gaps, right? You can't just go hire people willy-nilly, because you don't have the cash. And so how do you solve this problem? This was kind of our starting question, right? And we had some preconceptions because we'd been dealing with that ourselves as founders. Um, and so ultimately where that led us is to get started with building a marketplace. So we built a marketplace of vetted growth and marketing people. We decided to focus on one niche, so on growth and marketing, which arguably is like not even a niche. It's maybe too broad. But that's where we started. And we started with, hey, pay us a subscription, and then you can book sessions with these people who will help you, um, work through whatever it is that you're dealing with, or, that you're struggling with growth or marketing in some way. And it was pretty obvious this was bad from like maybe a couple months in, because for a bunch of reasons. One, it was pretty obvious people would ultimately churn because they would sign up and then they would book a session, but then they wouldn't book another session because everybody's too busy to be doing sessions all day.
Right.
Um, and the second thing we realized is that like really at the root of it, people were hoping to figure out if they should hire these people, right? They were like, I want to do a session, and if I like this person, maybe I'll hire them to help me in a more hands-on way or something. And so that was kind of like, and again, like doing this cycle of like we launched it and then we were putting people into it and then we were doing these customer discovery interviews and realizing these things, right? So in many ways, I think an ongoing cadence of customer discovery interviews is like fuel for everything else, right? It's
Yeah.
it's creating these insights that like the product team's using or the growth team's using or whatever. Um, so then we really focused on being a marketplace for the balance of last year, for most of
Mhm.
last year. And it was great. We brought in 150, somewhere between 150 and 200 companies. So call it, 15 to 20 companies a month coming in and saying, hey, we need this type of talent, et cetera. Um, and then again in November, we did another cycle of discovery. And we realized that perhaps, well, I think counterintuitively for me, the solution of like, here is a person to the problem of I need a person to do blank, it turns out it's not a great solution. I think this was like really counterintuitive to me.
Yeah.
Um, because if you have this, if you're a business and you have some problem and you have this preconception that the solution is I need to hire one person to do it. Um, if you hire that person, and in some cases this is true, especially in tactical things like I need a designer, I need a copywriter or something. This is like less true in um more kind of strategy type needs or
Yeah.
challenges. Um, but in any case, where we landed is like what's a better solution for people is to give them like a small team of people who can
Okay.
do that specific thing, um, and really well, who specialize in doing that thing. And so that's kind of a big shift we've made over the last couple months is focusing on we call them packaged services, and we rolled out our first one in December. We'll roll out additional packaged services in the second quarter. Um, and we're just kind of learning how to do this, like how do
Yeah.
you define a package service, and then how do you in an efficient way pull together the team out of our talent pool to like
Right.
deliver that on a monthly basis to the
And you're
customers, I
doing
think.
this with the customer discovery ongoing in the background so that you actually are
Totally.
meeting the right need. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And if you have one third last piece of advice, would love to hear it in terms of yeah, what your biggest learnings have been.
My last third biggest piece of advice would be I think it's important to distinguish as a founder entrepreneur between the product and the business.
Mm,
And so this is like two part. It's important to distinguish that like the thing that ultimately you will provide to or equip your customers with is different from the business, i.e. like the mechanism by which you will extract uh money from customers that they will happily pay you because you're solving a big problem for them in a great way, right? These are two very different things, and I think it's very important early to focus more on the business than I in the past as a founder have, and most founders do. A lot of
mm,
founders want to focus on building product, they want to focus on features, They want to focus on getting that product to people and getting feedback from them. And it's not to say that's not important. It's just if you don't also figure out the business, i.e. the customer's willingness to pay and the price point, and getting those early customers to pay so that you can trust their feedback because they're really your customer, then you're just setting yourself up for a whole bunch of challenges unnecessarily down the road. So that's the second thing, is
Mm.
distinguish between product and business, and spend at least as much time developing out and building and working on the business component of the company, not just the product.
Wow, I really, really like that. Thank you for sharing. And I guess it doesn't hurt to also have a co-founder who really supports all of your needs. I know you've talked a lot about Zach before and how supportive he's been.
The thing about the co-founder and what's so great about Zach is, like, it's not so much having a co-founder that, I'll put it this way. Zach and I have, like, the ability to drop our egos when we work together and argue with each other without any fear of being wrong. And
Right.
so essentially our coworker, our co-founder relationship is just one long constant cycle of arguments, and then whoever's, wrong, or whoever, has less likelihood of being right, let it go, consensus, move forward. And I think this is a really good dynamic for co-founders.
100%. 100%. Just being honest with each other. I think and yeah, again, checking your ego at the door, being honest, and being able to move on and evolve, I think is awesome. And you both have shown that you're able to do that. But Shelby, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been
Sure.
so awesome. I know I had some questions I prepared, but we went down such a more unique path. And I think that's so valuable for, myself and for listeners who are entrepreneurs and trying to get their business off the ground. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Cool. My pleasure.
Thank you.